My name is Daudi Mwakalukwa. I have worked as a wildlife warden in the Ngorongoro conservation area in northern Tanzania for over 2 decades. I've seen cheetahs run down prey with blinding speed, elephants mourn their dead, and hyenas bicker over bones in the red dust of dawn. But in all my years in the bush, nothing prepared me for the day I watched a lioness spare the life of an antelope calf, and then begin to care for it. It was late January, the middle of our wet season. The grasses had sprung up almost overnight, the earth transformed from brittle tan to a carpet of lush green. The calving season was in full swing. Herds of Thompson's gazelles, impalas, and wildebeest dotted the landscape. With new life came danger. Predators became more active, especially lions, whose movements during this time were often focused around these vulnerable young animals. I had taken the land cruiser out early that morning, alone except for my binoculars and logbook. My assignment was simple: monitor lion pride movements in the eastern section of the crater. We had received reports of increasing lion activity there, mostly around the acacia woodlands and the Mbunga plains. I knew one pride in particular that roamed this area well, the Mukoma pride. They were a dominant pride, led by 2 formidable males and made up of 5 adult lionesses and a growing number of juveniles. As I approached the far edge of the crater rim, I spotted a familiar figure resting beneath a fever tree, one of the lionesses of the Mukoma pride. Her name, in our logs, was Endeli. She was distinctive. Even from a distance, I could tell it was her from the notch in her left ear and a small healed scar across her snout. She was alone, which caught my attention. Lionesses often hunt in groups, especially when prey is abundant. She wasn't stalking. Instead, she was watching something. I parked at a respectful distance and raised my binoculars. That's when I saw it. Just 20 meters from her, nestled awkwardly in the grass, was a newborn Thompson's gazelle calf, still unsteady, legs trembling, fur damp and matted. It must have been born less than an hour ago. Its mother was nowhere in sight. Likely, she had bolted during labor or shortly afterward, perhaps sensing predators. That's common enough. Mothers sometimes abandon their young if danger is near, a painful but necessary instinct for survival. But what happened next was not common. Not at all. Endeli stood up and began walking toward the calf. I watched, holding my breath. My experience told me this would be over quickly. The calf, unable to run, would be taken in seconds. It was a routine moment in the cycle of life on the savannah. But Endeli stopped. She looked down at the calf and then, to my utter disbelief, she lay down next to it. At first, I thought she was toying with her prey, as lions sometimes do. They swat and paw at small animals before killing them. But there was no pawing. No swatting, no hunting posture. The calf, sensing no aggression, leaned its tiny body against her flank. I lowered my binoculars and blinked. Then raised them again. The scene hadn't changed. She began grooming it, licking the calf's fur, gently, deliberately, as if it were one of her own cubs. I radioed back to camp, barely able to get the words out. "You won't believe this," I said to my colleague. "A lioness is grooming a newborn gazelle calf." There was silence on the other end. "Say again?" I repeated myself, this time slower. He asked for the GPS coordinates and said he'd inform the research unit. For the next hour, I sat in stunned silence and watched. The calf, surprisingly relaxed, even nestled against Endeli's belly as if trying to suckle. Of course, she had no milk to give, and it seemed to confuse her. She sniffed and nudged the calf gently, stood up, circled it, and lay back down. When the calf bleated softly, she responded with soft chuffs, sounds I'd only ever heard lionesses make toward their own cubs. By midday, the sun had crept higher. I expected Endeli to get up and leave the calf behind, perhaps moving to shade or rejoining the pride. But she didn't. She stayed. She seemed protective, almost anxious when vultures began circling overhead. Once, when a jackal approached, she stood and gave chase. The jackal retreated immediately. The calf remained alive, unharmed, under her care. That evening, I returned to base and gave a full report. I checked and rechecked our behavioral logs. Instances of lions sparing prey? Rare, but not unheard of. A maternal lioness adopting an animal she should see as food? This was something else entirely. I wasn't the only one who was skeptical. "Are you sure it wasn't her cub?" asked one of the researchers. A very young lion cub can resemble a calf from a distance. I was less than 100 meters away, I said. And I saw her grooming it. No doubt. Gazelle calf. The following day, we returned as a team. By then, word had spread among a small circle of researchers and local conservationists. We found her still with the calf, now nestled beneath her foreleg. It had survived the night. And it looked stronger. Endeli had clearly not hunted. She showed signs of hunger, her flanks more sunken, her pace slower. But she hadn't eaten, and she hadn't abandoned the calf. The next few days would deepen the mystery, and lead to even more astonishing observations. But in that moment, the entire landscape seemed to hold its breath around this unlikely pair. Why did she do it? Was it a mistake, a misdirected maternal instinct? Was she mourning a lost cub, replacing grief with this fragile, foreign creature? Or was it something else entirely, something we couldn't yet understand? What I knew then, and still feel to this day, is that I had witnessed something profound. Something that shook the foundations of what we think we know about instinct, nature, and the invisible lines between predator and prey. And it was only just beginning. By the third morning, we had established a routine. I would rise before first light, load the cruiser with water, coffee, and notes, and head toward the same patch of the Mbunga Plains. The lioness, Endeli, had moved very little. We always found her near the same clump of acacias, with the gazelle calf still by her side. That calf, that impossibly small creature, was no longer as fragile as when I first saw it. Its legs were steadier. It could now stand without falling, and I watched it make brief, wobbling steps. But still, it stayed close to her, rarely more than a few feet away. Endeli remained near it almost constantly, though she would sometimes rise and scan the horizon with that slow, powerful grace unique to lions. For the first 2 days, she didn't attempt to hunt. That fact alone puzzled us. A healthy adult lioness, especially one separated from her pride, would typically need to eat within 48 hours, particularly during the wet season when movement requires more energy and prey is abundant. But Endeli seemed distracted. Her behavior was not that of a lioness on a hunt. Instead, her every motion was preoccupied with the safety of that calf. On the 4th day, we witnessed something extraordinary. A herd of Thompson's gazelles grazed nearby, their slender shapes moving like wind through grass. The calf, sensing the scent of its own kind, bleated and tried to wander toward them. It only managed a few steps before Endeli intercepted it, gently herding it back toward her with a nudge of her snout. It was a surreal image, a lioness guarding her adopted prey from its actual herd. Later that same day, a group of juvenile lions from the Mukoma Pride approached the area. These young lions, barely 2 years old, were likely out on an exploratory patrol. They were full of youthful bravado and prone to chasing almost anything that moved. As they neared the grove where Endeli and the calf rested, I watched from the cruiser, unsure what to expect. My heart was pounding. I was sure it would end there. That the other lions would spot the calf and instinct would take over. But Endeli rose to meet them, not in greeting, but in warning. She positioned herself between the calf and the others and let out a low, guttural growl. The juveniles paused. I could see their confusion. One even tried to flank her, peering curiously around her shoulder. Then she charged. No claws, no teeth. Just a burst of speed and force, a warning. The young lions scattered. One tripped over itself in the grass. None challenged her further. Afterward, she returned to the calf, chuffing softly, as if to calm it. It pressed its body against hers. This moment, this overt act of protection, erased all doubt among my colleagues. This was not confusion. This was not a mistake of identity. This was intentional. The story began spreading, first among rangers, then researchers, and eventually to wildlife behaviorists around the globe. Our camp was flooded with emails. Some called it an anomaly, others a miracle. A few called it an aberration, a distortion of natural behavior caused by trauma or hormonal imbalance. But the calf continued to live. That night, I stayed out longer than usual, watching them under the moonlight. The crater had gone quiet, the day's chaos replaced by a hush that only comes once the predators have eaten and the scavengers have fallen asleep. I watched her lick the calf's face as it dozed, then settle beside it with her great paw resting protectively across its back. I wondered if she had recently lost a cub. It would explain her actions. Lions do grieve. I've seen mothers pace and search for hours after losing one. They chuff at nothing, sniff the air, return to places where their cubs last played. We had no direct evidence Endeli had given birth recently, but she was of breeding age, and her mammary glands were slightly distended. Perhaps she lost her litter during birth or to another predator, even another lion. Infanticide among males seeking dominance is not uncommon. If that were true, then perhaps she was projecting that loss onto this calf. Some researchers supported this theory. They compared it to recorded cases of maternal instinct overwhelming the kill response. Most of these cases, however, lasted only hours, sometimes less. Endeli's care extended into days. On day 5, a new challenge arose. The calf had not eaten properly in all this time. It had tried to nurse from Endeli, but of course, there was no milk. Her grooming and protection were not enough. The calf began showing signs of weakness again. It moved slower, stumbled more often, and its breathing became labored. We faced a dilemma. Some in our camp argued we should intervene. It's cruel, one researcher said. We're watching it die slowly. Others reminded us of our role, observers, not participants. Our mandate was to study natural behavior, not alter it, no matter how unusual or heartbreaking. We reached a compromise. We would not interfere unless the calf was suffering acutely. But we would continue monitoring around the clock. That afternoon, Endeli left the calf for the first time in nearly 48 hours. She walked east, following a herd of impalas. She was thin now, and we feared she would not return. The calf stood alone beneath the acacia, its legs trembling. We waited, counting each hour. My stomach churned with the knowledge that hyenas moved through this area in the evenings. Then, just before dusk, she returned. And this time, she had blood on her muzzle. She had hunted successfully. Not far, we found the remains of an impala about 600 meters away. But what happened next surprised us again. She ate, yes. She fed heavily. But she did not offer food to the calf. This wasn't unusual. Lions are strict carnivores, and they don't share with herbivores. But the moment she finished, she returned directly to the calf and began grooming it again. She had satisfied her own need and resumed her guardianship. There was something else, something subtler. Her behavior had grown more anxious. She paced more. She stayed closer. The calf seemed weaker. Though it tried to nuzzle her side, it no longer attempted to stand. That night, the wind blew hard across the crater. Clouds rolled in from the west, and a light rain fell. I stayed out, wrapped in a poncho, watching from the shadows. Occasionally I'd sweep my torchlight across the clearing. The lioness never left the calf's side. Just before midnight, I saw her do something I still cannot fully explain. She picked the calf up, gently, with her teeth, the way she would carry a cub, and moved it into a denser patch of bush, away from open ground. She was hiding it, shielding it, from danger? From scavengers? Or from the reality she could not change? The calf died sometime before morning. We found it at first light, tucked under a shrub. Its eyes closed. No wounds. No struggle. Just the stillness of death. Endeli lay beside it, head on her paws. She didn't move as we approached, only looked up briefly and then away. She stayed with it the entire day. By the following dawn, she was gone. Only her paw prints remained in the soft earth, leading away, eastward, toward the heart of the crater. When we returned to the grove the morning after the calf's death, the air had changed. The grass was wet with mist and silence hung over the place like a curtain. Endeli was gone. The calf lay where she had hidden it, nestled beneath thorny brush, untouched by scavengers, as if a lioness's scent had protected it even after death. We stood around it quietly. No one spoke for several minutes. Then, gently, we documented everything. We took photographs, logged location coordinates, and noted its physical state. No signs of predation. No visible injury. It had likely died from starvation and exposure. But it had lived, longer than any of us expected, and it had lived with a lioness who should have killed it on sight. For days after, I couldn't shake the image of them, predator and prey resting together beneath the same tree. I had seen so many kills in my time. So many scenes of pursuit and struggle, nature following its brutal rhythm. But this was something different. something I could not file away in a box labeled instinct. In the weeks that followed, Endali rejoined the Mukoma pride. We spotted her again 2 weeks later near the hippo pools, in the company of 2 of her sisters and one of the pride males. She appeared healthy. She even hunted again, a clean impala kill, as though everything had returned to normal. But for me, and for many who heard the story, normal would never mean the same thing again. News of the event had already reached beyond the crater. Conservationists and ethologists from universities and institutions abroad began to reach out. They asked for GPS data, timestamps, behavioral logs, even wind conditions at the time of observation. Several flew out to meet with us and combed through hours of footage we had taken. They searched for answers, even as they debated the very questions. Some theorized that the lioness had experienced a hormonal disturbance, perhaps brought on by the loss of a cub. Oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone, plays a role in mammalian maternal behavior. In rare circumstances, it can be triggered in response to stimuli unrelated to one's own species. A few pointed to similar, though much shorter, episodes recorded among captive animals: tigers caring for piglets, dogs nursing kittens. But nothing quite matched this case: a wild lioness, unaided, untrained, unprovoked, adopting a prey species, and defending it against her own kind. Others believed it was a moment of what we call misplaced maternal instinct, a behavioral error. Like a machine misfiring. But this, too, seemed lacking. Machines don't grieve. They don't protect. They don't mourn. We had observed something that carried emotional weight, and the data, while valuable, couldn't fully explain it. More than once, I was asked if I thought Endali understood what she was doing. Did she recognize the calf as a gazelle? Almost certainly. Did she intend to keep it alive? Yes, all her actions suggested as much. Did she feel something we would call empathy? Here, the lines blur. Empathy, in the human sense, is a complex construct. It implies self-awareness, projection, compassion, even moral reasoning. But in the animal kingdom, simpler forms exist, ones rooted not in ethics but in instinctive connection. And yet, how do we explain a lioness walking away from a gazelle calf and not killing it? Not just sparing it, protecting it, grooming it, moving it when danger approached. Theories will vary, but I can only speak to what I saw. I saw a lioness who lost something. I saw her try to fill that absence with something entirely foreign, and in doing so, challenge everything we thought we understood about predator-prey dynamics. She did not abandon her instincts. She overrode them. There's something I often tell visitors to the reserve, usually when they ask the inevitable question, isn't nature cruel? Yes, nature is cruel, but it is also patient. Surprising. Sometimes, even gentle. What Endali did wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a metaphor or a fable. It was real. A living, breathing lioness lay next to a calf she should have eaten, and for 6 days, she chose not to. Not out of confusion, but something more, something deliberate. I think about her still. I wonder if she remembers. I wonder if, in some quiet moment, when the world settles and the wind moves through the grass, she pauses, and remembers the small heartbeat that pressed once against hers. This story doesn't end with triumph or tragedy. It ends with a question. One we still ask, and perhaps always will. What do animals feel, and how much more do they understand than we assume? Whatever the answer, I know this. Out there on the crater floor, in the shadow of acacia trees and under the gaze of the Rift Valley sky, I saw something I never expected, and I will never forget it.